I'm terrible, I know.
No, you're not. You're awful.
And I'm like, no, awful's awful.
That's the same. Terrible.
You ready?
Yes.
Call the roll.
Mayor Bain.
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Zapata.
Here.
Councilman Best.
Present.
Councilwoman Mitchell.
Here.
Councilman Petrolano.
Here.
Please stand for invocation. Councilwoman Mitchell.
Oh, Heavenly Father, as we gather here tonight, we ask that you both bless and guide the council, our administration, and our residents so that the decisions that are made are always in the best interest of our community, our residents, our children, and the future of our beloved city. Amen.
Amen. We're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to new business A, discussion, the enhancement of the downtown Miami Springs Gateway.
Mayor and Council, just as a preface to our discussion, before you have a full legislative packet, meaning that you have everything that we would have prepared if this is going on for a reason. And the reason why we did that is because in years past, on a variety of different issues, you might have a memo that begins to introduce the topic, and what ends up happening is that we're not talking apples and oranges. We're talking apples, oranges, grapes, because everyone's coming to the table thinking about a different kind of fruit. And for transparency purposes, and for at least continuity of a conversation, we want everyone to be, not only the community to have all the information that you have and that we have, but also for us to be able to sort of read from the same sheet of music. And so just wanted to preface that insofar as the agenda meeting that you've got, the agenda packet you have before you.
Okay, let me read the introduction section of our memo. As was briefly discussed on the May 29th regular council meeting, staff for some time has been looking at ways to enhance the entrance into Miami Springs in the downtown area, which we have come to call the Gateway. For years, past council, residents, and commercial property owners have expressed a need to enhance the beauty and look of the Gateway. Members of the current City Council have expressed this desire as well. This area has seen some recent activity with the sale of certain properties like the Starbucks property that sold in December of 2017 and the photography studio property, the latter of which is under construction and will soon host Apple Dental, as well as the placement for sale of the theater property. Other than the dental office building, the area has not experienced any meaningful change. While staff began to focus on this area last year, our attention was diverted from time to time by a variety of other issues, including Hurricane Irma, the current fiscal year budget, and other operational issues. At the end of March of this year, I received a letter from Mariana Santana, the widow of the late Carlos Santana, which I have included with this memo as attachment A. As you will read in this letter, Mrs. Santana generally expresses frustration at her repeated failed attempts to sell the theater property, citing the reservations of numerous brokers and interested parties about buying the property given the onerous property regulations in the downtown area. This letter caused staff to take the Gateway from the back burner and make it a pending concern. For the past 2 months, the city planner, city attorney, and myself have discussed, researched, and analyzed ways to foster enhancements of the Gateway that, number one, improve the area to better reflect the character and quality of life in the city. Number two, better identifies the city of Miami Springs and its history. 3, enhances the area character and authenticity as a principal entrance to the city. 4, fosters increased business and pedestrian activities for the residents. And number 5, helps spur economic development and an expanded commercial tax base. It can hardly be argued that Gateway is in need of improvement in the area of building design, landscaping, signage, streetscape, gateway features, and traffic calming. Regrettably, the city finds itself in a difficult position to bring about some of the desired changes. Some of the improvements to the area could be accomplished as city capital improvements, but that capital outlay would be costly and exceeds funds the city has available for infrastructure improvements. Additionally, most of the desired changes involve private property, requiring the buy-in of private property owners. The current regulations for the area have generally failed to produce the type of gateway that is currently desired. In keeping with the historical approach that the city has taken, we began to consider policy changes that could bring about the changes that are generally desired of the gateway. In turn, we turned to some of the historical information prepared for the city, which included the Dover Coal Report from 2001. You will find applicable excerpts of it included with this memo as attachment B. The report correctly identifies the gateway as a scenic entrance into the city and downtown area. The bridges, layout, and circle provide a natural place for drivers to have the opportunity to become aware of what the area has to offer, as opposed to a straight road, if there was more to look at. While we all agree that the downtown Miami Springs is a beautifully planned area, the report identified conditions that are still present today, such as buildings that lack architectural detail, an entrance without a strong sense of place, a unique character, untapped amenities for public enjoyment. Any policy that would work to improve the area would need to address these areas. I'm going to jump across because Dan and Chris will handle the technical aspects. Under conclusion, we believe that the Gateway Overlay District, which we are proposing, will begin to solve the concerns that have been raised and continue to be raised about the unsightly conditions in parts of the Gateway. The design elements will tie the buildings together. The flexibility and intensity and parking will encourage property owners to improve their properties, and the creative excellence standards will cause private property owners to bring about the features that are missing in our gateway. The Gateway Overlay District will help accomplish the goals, objectives, and policies in the comp plan for the Central Business District of further improving our suburban downtown into a thriving area with business amenities for residents, while also making our gateway a quintessential part of the Miami Springs identity. Staff requests that City Council's consideration of the recommended policies as well as feedback, with the goal of bringing forward ordinances for public hearings in June.
Mayor and Council, I'll take over from that point. So as William alluded, the idea is a very minor policy change to both the city's comp plan and to the zoning code, and I'll go into why you need both of them. The idea is to create what we've called the Miami Springs Gateway Overlay District, and the reason it's called overlay, I'll get into it in a moment. It's for the area identified in Exhibit C, which is on the projector on the overhead. So you can consider it the sort of the 3 blocks around the bridges from Nakota, which you could consider that where the Vaquita is and where Farm Store and the and Crackers, to Curtis Parkway, which is where Apple Dental is, and the Starbucks, 1 block. The next block being Carlos Santana's properties from Burritoville to the theater, Seventh-day Adventist component of it, and then the next portion of a block would be the sort of Washington's Gym property, and that would be so the narrowly tailored area that this quote-unquote overlay district would encompass. So as the name suggests, this is a sub-area of the Central Business District. It effectively would lay on top of and work with the Central Business District in order to bring about some of the objectives of the Central Business District that have gone unmet in that area. So we crafted I think a very good sentence, I think, that identifies what the purpose is. The goal is to facilitate placemaking by enhancing neighborhood character and authenticity through participatory design and identifying projects such as architecturally significant buildings, entrance features, art in public places, improved landscaping and signage, traffic calming features, and promotion of the city's history. So the idea is that all we're doing at this point is simply introducing some policy requirements in our comp plan and then in our zoning code that work together to encourage effectively the private property owners to bring about some of these things. This is not a capital outlay or some kind of entrance feature project. So what you have before you, included in the packet, are the two draft ordinances. This is not a public hearing that would accomplish the policy. So effectively, all the land use categories are established in our comp plan. Central Business District, Neighborhood Business District. We're creating a subcategory, so it's got to go in our comp plan. And effectively, as it reads in the ordinance, the idea is to micro-target just this area, because as compared to the rest of the Central Business District, it is a little bit different. It's unique because it happens to be one of our gateways. The same could be said of Curtis Parkway near the entrance of EG. It's part of another district, but it is different because it's a principal artery into the city. So effectively, what's done is you create the land use subcategory, you give it a description of a goal like we have put on there what we just discussed, and then you identify it on the map. So the map would stay Central Business District. You just would like hash over it and say these new sets of policies apply. The changes have very little to do with making significant changes in the Central Business District. The uses would stay exactly the same for the Central Business District as they are today. The height limitations are the same. What we're trying to do is, from a policy perspective, is accentuate the community character. So I'm going to go over very quickly, from a 10,000 foot view, what some of these things do. So the first thing we add is a new design standard, which will require new construction projects and or renovation projects to exhibit elements of Pueblo. One thing, Stadnik is, say, that's sort of at the heart of the district. It's historically designated. When Carlos Santana first changed his properties, he tried to add elements to it that worked, not necessarily uniform, but worked with Stadnik's. So the idea would be, let's play that up. Let's make that a requirement for a lot of reasons. One is it brings some character continuity to the area, but more importantly, it also accentuates our history as a community. Right now, and I'll give you a prime example. Not that I think that what the good dentist is doing is ugly by any stretch of the imagination, but if this policy were in place and he bought that corner and said, I want to redevelop it, no problem. If you want to redevelop it as is, you now would have to conform to exhibiting some elements of Pueblo, and he would work with Chris to get that accomplished. The second thing that this would do would be to address parking requirements. The downtown area is effectively grandfathered in for parking, and it's grandfathered in a rather unique way. Most of the time, you grandfather in a use, and so if you have retail and the building had 2 parking spaces and another retail comes in, it would be 2 parking spaces. We grandfather in the building and the intensity, and Chris did a calculation that if you had a what was it, an 1,800 square foot restaurant, right? Right. If you have a retail space that was 1,800 square feet, that might require 6 parking spaces. A restaurant use might now require 18 parking spaces, but we're currently already grandfathering in those properties. What this requires now is simply the ability for Chris, on a case-by-case basis, depending on the use, whether it's a renovation or a construction, to say, let's take a look at what this project is bringing to the table. How much on-site parking are you offering? How much off-street parking are you offering? And as we discussed, Canal Street has a lot of on-street parking, and there's also a public parking lot that's next to it. We have bike sharing now. More people are riding golf carts. So the idea is, so how do you make this all work from a flexible perspective? All this is in a way to try and encourage those individuals that want to do something with their property to have additional flexibility. Another component, sort of the third component of this, and really this is the part that brings about the character building that we were discussing, are what we're calling these creative excellence standards. And so, like we have on 36th Street, 36th Street has a base floor area ratio, and if people want to come in and try and enjoy an increase in that floor area ratio, they've got to do something for us. It's not something for nothing. And what was done was we began to distill some of those elements that we'd like to see in the policy come out into life. And that is, so are you going to be offering traffic calming, like improved crosswalks or a trolley stop? Are you going to be offering art in public places, improved signage? Are you willing to fund an entry feature? Are you what are you trying to do to beautify it from a project perspective? It has nothing to do, even if whether it's on the project site or on right of way. All of those things go to mature landscaping. Some of the properties in the Gateway area have very little landscaping, and all that goes to character. And what that in turn gives is a formula where a property owner can go from a base of 1.0 FAR to a small increase of 1.7. And let me tell you how we got there. And this was discussed with the previous council. I know it's been shared with all of you. The Central Business District has an FAR of 1.0, yet many buildings already exceed that. And also, Chris wanted me to point out the fact that when we say a floor area ratio of 1.0, it's actually 0.7 on the first floor, because we require a rear yard setback. So effectively, 70% of your building can go here. You got to put another 30% on top. We got that 1.7 because we did an inventory of all of the Central Business District and looked at all the buildings. And this building that we're in is a 1.2 FAR. Green Chiropractic is a 1.7. A couple other buildings right
The
here.
fitness center?
Fitness center,
Is
and
that
this
1.6?
corner building is a 1.6. We have examples of 1.4.
There's nothing to speak
And
unless the presentation's done. I'll open it up.
the issue being that if calamity were to befall any of these buildings, hurricane, tornado, fire, that building would not be able to go back if it exceeds 1.0, which, when you factor in the parking requirements of a new building, it would dramatically change the character of the community if one of these buildings that we've come to know and love happens to fall for some reason. So what we did was say, all right, and then, Stadniks, which is at the heart, as I mentioned, of the Gateway District, is at a 1.4 as well. And so the idea was give property owners the option, not the requirement, to say, I want to develop my property, or I want to renovate my property like the Apple Dentist. If the Apple Dentist says, I don't want to do anything to it, I want to leave it as is, you're enjoying your FAR, whatever it might be, no problem. At a minimum, you have to conform to the new design standards. That means at a minimum, you're going to add elements of Pueblo Mission Revival to try and create some continuity through the new district. If by chance he wanted to put a second floor on his building and enjoy a 0.5 increase to the floor area ratio, that would be possible under this policy, but they'd have to come back and say, well, what are we getting to allow you to go up that 0.5 density? You have a principled entrance building, meaning right as you come in, are you gonna improve that crosswalk that goes from one side of the street to the other? Are you gonna add signage? Are you gonna add a trolley stop, with that area becoming a location for the trolley stops? So all those things went into play of how do we get the property owners to actually take this opportunity when they're gonna go and improve their property to give something back to the community. Some of these things are very costly. Some of these things may be available by grants, but we're not the kind of city that has the money to make significant capital outlays in these things. And if we had the private sector see that we're making a good faith effort from a policy perspective to help them, reuse their property, then the idea is that they would make a commensurate investment in the community as well. So that effectively covers, from the policy perspective, the existing conditions and the implementation. The only thing that we didn't touch was just some of the underlying conditions that we can have just Chris touch on briefly, that we know, but this is coming from staff, so we just want to identify what are the things that from a planning perspective aren't jiving currently with the Central Business District.
Before Chris, I just wanted to add a couple of things. The zoning is not going to change. The uses are not going to change in this new district. The floor area ratio, the max will be 1.7, but we still have the 3-story, 40-foot cap.
Right.
I just wanted to get that out there before we turn it to Chris.
Good evening. So when we think about Miami Springs, the physical assets, there's two things that come to mind for me. One is our great tree-lined residential streets, and our other is our charming downtown. The tree-lined residential streets, they're pretty much taking care of themselves. The downtown, unfortunately, is not. So what do we have and what do we need? In the gateway, I'm going to focus really on the gateway portion, not the entire central business district. We have what you call great bones. They're really strong. You enter and exit through interesting and historic bridges. The entrance is well planned and laid out. Curtis Parkway quickly opens up to a large circle centered on a gazebo dotted with large mature oak trees. This is the quintessential town square that we admire all over the country when we travel. And when people are now building new downtowns and master plan communities, they recreate or try to recreate the very downtown atmosphere that we have here. They build that, they recognize that from their travels, and they want to recreate it here. Well, we already have it, and we've had it for probably 85 years. But what we don't have, there's a lot of unrealized potential that I think you all probably recognize in the Gateway. There's a weak sense of place, a mix of uncoordinated architectural styles. There's many gaps in the build-to line. You typically want to hold that build-to line to keep it tight and keep it interesting. There's a lot of gaps that we have. There's poor signage, poor landscaping. This results in vacancies, there's turnover, underutilized tenant space where perhaps we have offices that may be better served as restaurants, things like that. And I think this proposed legislation is an opportunity to begin to correct that unrealized potential and give Miami Springs the active, vibrant gateway and downtown that it deserves.
So with that, Mayor and Council, certainly open up to you for questions. I know we've had the opportunity to speak one-on-one. This will be opportunity to share thoughts. There is information that we didn't discuss that we're happy to address with any questions.
Okay, I will let, after we go, I will let people who want to speak come up and speak. So you will be allowed to speak if you intend to, but we're going to discuss it. You guys hear the presentation, and then you'll have something to talk about. I open it up. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, William and Chris, Danny, for your presentation on this. Why don't you help us in real time here understand what 1.0 to 1.7 means?
Right. So as
Most people don't know what that means.
Right. I mean, so floor area ratio is effectively the amount that you can build on your property. Without any setbacks, a 1.0 FAR means you can effectively build out to the four corners of your property. In the downtown area, we say you need to have a rear yard setback. So take away 30%. So about 70% of your lot you can cover with a building, and you can put 30% on top. What you can see, for example, on, let's just use the most intense building, in air quotes, the Green Chiropractic building. That building is effectively a square. The second floor is the same as the first floor, with very little recess on the back. That's 1.7. Stadnick's, which has a smaller second floor, that's 1.4.
So fuller utilization of property is what you're
It's
suggesting.
a slight increase in the utilization of property, recognizing that it's most likely just going to go to increase your second floor. Because I mean, given what we're talking about, it's not going to be that significant of an increase.
And this overlay, if you will, to use your term, would allow and possibly attract more brokers and investors to come in and want to do something as opposed to 1.0. Is that correct?
You're effectively allowing higher utilization of a property,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even if that means simply allowing a second floor to be placed on an existing building. And Chris talks all the time about getting cold calls, not even necessarily from brokers, but from interested parties, saying, you know, if we bought this building, could we do this? I want to run a business out on my first floor, but I want to have an office, a full-blown office on the second floor. And while some of the buildings on Westwood Drive have that because they exceed the 1.0 FAR. Most of them don't. The other thing to consider is the parking. And while we're not necessarily talking about the central business district, we're only talking about the gateway. It's easiest when you're thinking about a vacant parcel over here. Again, just for clarity purposes, it's excluded, but by way of example, it's the best one. Not only does, for example, Aldo Bartolone's property have to contend with FAR, he also contend with on-site parking because there's no building there. So by the time that you're done recessing for parking and recessing for your backyard setback, what you're left with is a tower that's separated from the rest of the buildings that no one's really going to build, which is why that property is vacant. Same thing goes for the theater parcel, or Washington Gym's parcel. Is that you can't realize the full potential of the property because we've got these regulations that were put in place, which I'm not saying they don't make sense across the board. I'm saying that when you look at them from certain perspectives, they do limit what anybody would want to do to a property. If I want to run a business, I want to have an office, I'd like to maximize my patronage area and maybe put my office upstairs, or put my business down the first floor and have an office upstairs that maybe I can rent out and make some more money to help make ends meet. And that's the idea.
And this particular idea or thought process going forward could be done without changing the zoning in the designated area that you've outlined there.
Absolutely. So not only we're creating an overlay district, but the underlying it's central business district. So on a map it would read as a property would read as, let's just say, Seventh-day Adventist, which is another property we hear it's vacant and they're thinking about leasing it, thinking about selling it. That property would read as the land use category Central Business District with Miami Springs Gateway Overlay District on top.
So if a potential individual wanted to come in and develop on that, they would have that capability.
They'd go to Central Business District, read all the requirements, and then look to see what other incentives are in that gateway area to help. So effectively, that's on the land use side. On the zoning side, the zoning stays exactly the same.
Okay,
throughout
that was my question, Dan. Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else?
I have questions.
Sure.
Okay, so the elements, they would have to, in order to increase the FAR to 0.7 more, they would have to select, I see many of them are 0.25. How many would they have to select? Like,
It's really up to them. There's no way to forecast because we have no idea what somebody is in their construction budget, what in their use desires. So let's just say they want to get to 0.4, then sort of like
they would have to pick like
they'd
0.4.
pick to get to
Okay.
that 0.4. And if by chance they have amenities that exceed 0.4, and let's just say get 0.5, but they don't want to build that extra
Right.
0.1, then we got a little bit of added value without actually getting the additional building. So the one thing that is certain is that regardless of the combination of creative excellence elements that they implement, it could never exceed 1.7. It's in the same way that no matter what a property owner does on 36th Street, their design standards could never
Right.
exceed 3.0. And certainly just one other thing, the fact that it's this area only, it means that those elements can only be used for this area. That is, somebody on Westwood Drive could not try and exceed 1.0 by saying, oh, I'm going to put up a pretty sign or add landscaping. I'm sorry, you're not in the gateway. It only applies to this area right here.
Right. I just wanted to make sure, and I appreciate that our meeting on Friday because that was really very informative. It's just that I had a chance to look over the elements and look at the points, and so that was one of my questions. And as I looked at the elements, if they picked pretty much like any three, that qualifies for them to go up to 1.7. But as I look at what they are, I think some of them were being really lenient in terms of where we are mandating, because some things are really just a given. So like pedestrian amenities, as an incentive, wouldn't we want that to be a given, that they would have to provide amenities for pedestrians?
We can mandate as much as we want to mandate in the area. Just keep some of the pedestrian amenities that were discussed, like the right-of-way improvements, are what will be called off-site improvements, which typically go to mitigate a traffic increase, if any. What these things at the end of the day are mandates. We're not mandating them. We're saying if you want if you want an increase, you got to do some of these things. The opposite, and this is one of the things that Miami Springs historically has not done. I think the last mandate may have been the color palette change, is to tell property owners, you're mandated to do this and to do it by a certain amount of time. So as opposed to being heavy-handed, I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just giving you the logic of how staff.
Well, I'm going to tell you where my concern comes from, that the way that it's written leaves a lot of room for them.
Okay.
And I really am in agreement with what Chris was talking about, the building features and the coordination of those features. And so if we leave it wide open like this, not wide, but more open than I think it should be, and I mean, the rest can chime in at some point here. I just think that they're getting a lot for pretty little.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
So I
Like, I
think-
care about it being the place that we're talking about it being and enhancing our downtown area, but I think that this is the time that we have now to define these really carefully, so they are in the best interest of the downtown area.
So I think what you're saying is that then, and we would obviously have to drill down on it exactly, but in the same way that the new architectural design is a mandate for all new stuff, you'd like some of these things to maybe come out of the area of
Maybe the word mandate is too strong, like sort of like
a requirement.
required.
It's a requirement, right?
Sounds a little less, right?
Instead of being optional, to be required.
Like in the building features, the first floor retail with a minimum of 1,000 square feet and direct access to such uses, full storefront windows. So we're saying that that's encouraged.
Right.
So we have someone that wants to just build straight up walls because they want to put shelves against the walls. They're not going to have any window, and you're looking at a downtown area that's going to be very uncoordinated. Like you're going to have full cement here, windows here. You know what I'm saying?
So to encourage, so not to encourage, but to require that activation of the first floor.
That the first floor needs to have certain requirements.
Okay.
So that those storefronts or whatever there are, those business fronts, have some uniformity. Because then we'll be back to this haphazard, you know, sort of looking downtown area.
I got, okay.
And then,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
The council agree with that?
I totally agree with it.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I would caution us here before we go too far with that point that you don't want a cookie cutter mentality either, where everything looks the
no.
same.
I think
but
that's
some
what she.
uniformity. So this is a downtown, and we distinguish it as this is what it is. The same way that we want an entrance that says, hey, we're not in Hialeah anymore. We're in Miami Springs. You know, we stand, we can make this a really good thing, but that's why now we have to be careful and have the kind of details that we want to put in there.
Excuse me. Would that be put into the basically in the architectural part of it as a requirement? Would you move that out and move it into the architectural requirement as?
Yeah, please. That was my first thought, but.
No, I want to say I completely agree with you, Councilwoman, because we shouldn't be rewarding things that should be required, like pedestrian amenities and things like that. There's another category that's sort of meshed in there that we're talking about that Dan was alluding to, that you probably would get some bonuses for creating landscaped islands on city right-of-way, fixing up our streets, fixing up our sidewalks, those kind of things. That's incentive for you to do something and get a little more square footage out of it. But amenities, practical amenities like storefront glass, for me, that's a requirement. I don't want to reward anyone for doing something like that. I don't want to reward anyone for having safe egress and ingress to the property, or safe sidewalks or wide sidewalks. So I think we need to look at that a little more carefully. Like Dan said, drill that down a little bit. Take some of the things out of there that we really feel should be requirements and aren't going to be rewarded. They're going to be expected, and then reward the things that go above and beyond that. And maybe take a little look more carefully at lowering some of the numbers a bit, because I think you're right. If you do 2 or 3 of them, you're there. And I think we're probably looking to get a little more out of that. So that's a great point.
And for clarification, the reason that part is not that the whole thing is draft, but the yellow the yellow amount of FAR, if you will, that's very, very draft. I mean, that's we wanted to make sure that we had the right elements first before we even begin to start assigning real values to them.
Right, and I share that sentiment.
Okay.
The other thing, for example, the decorative water features on site improvements. That is so open that could be anything. And it's supposed to be approved by this factor for water feature exceed half of 1% of the cost of the building, and that's approved by who? By the city in terms of the permit. I would like to see like something like that. Could that come to council? Or at least to our planning and zoning or whatever boards look at this, because somebody could come and put a giant, like, I don't know, horse or a dragon with water coming out of its mouth or something. You see, like, I care about what this is going to be.
I understand that. I don't mean to laugh, but
And you have all kinds of like craziness out there. So I really did read these in detail and put myself in the position of, okay, somebody comes and the way that it's written, I don't want it to give so much leeway that we're going to feel sorry that we didn't put more detail in here.
Okay, understood that.
The improvements of rights of way on the, what's the alley improvement we're talking about? What alley is that?
Certain portions of the, I mean, so between Washington's Gym property and the residential, that's an alley. All around the theater is technically an alley. And then you've got some elements by Canal Street that tie into the parking lot that would also be an alley. I don't think is the Paseo technically an alley? The one, no. I mean, although as we know, that Paseo needs improvement too. But that was the idea, that you would also get, so some of these buildings are accessible from the rear, and they could and have been increasingly used by patrons as an entrance. So to try and improve that from the property side.
And so then one final thing that this was what really concerned me the most, and I think I expressed it when we met. I had a question about this. I see that they have a .25 under building features, meeting rooms, assembly rooms, conference rooms, and then if you turn the page under the same category, it says hotel rooms. So this, the way that this is written, these amenities, to me, I'm concerned that it incentivizes hotels rather than housing. Like the whole mixed use is fine. I would hate to think that possibly a hotel could go up there, and I just want to make sure that those aren't incentives we're giving them. I don't think how hotel rooms would be an incentive at all, even though that one is only .01.
Just so that you know, I mean, so what we essentially did was we started with the elements from the 36th Street district, and started to eliminate those that we thought were completely out of character with the gateway, and so that is something currently incentivized on 36th Street. We can eliminate that.
I want that eliminated.
Yeah, that's why I had expressed that when we met, that I was a little concerned about that, and the reality is, because for example, the theater, which is the property that really, I guess a lot of people have approached purchasing, and it just sits there, and it would be nice if that were something nice. That building right now has over 33,000 square feet. So if they take it up to a 1.7, they could have an additional over 23,000 square feet. And so when I see that, and then I see hotels there, that is sort of scary for me.
Okay, absolutely. If there's consensus on council, we can
eliminate that.
All right.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor, I agree with what Councilwoman Zapata said, but I would like to even go further with the first floor. I think that this is an opportunity for us to expand Miami Springs and not recreate the problem that we have on Westward Drive, where we just don't encourage pedestrian activities, pedestrian lounging. These restaurants and shops along Westward Drive have very limited sidewalk in front of them. They're built right up to the sidewalk. And one of the most attractive things that we have for our city, and that we live in South Florida, is the ability to year-round be outdoors and enjoy the outdoors. So I think if we're doing this, I would like us to consider requiring all first floor buildings to have, and what I envision is something similar to what Bella Bakery has, perhaps.
That recessed arcade?
Some sort of recess is mandatory on all first floors. So that we have a wide sidewalk, and in addition to that, even the shops, if it's not a restaurant, the shops, have a place to show their merchandise or have something attractive. But I think that would be across the board, mandatory,
We-
and
we-
create it
we-
more of a pedestrian area.
We did contemplate that, and as a matter of fact, we even drilled down on the picture of Dover Cole. That rendering seems to have a recessed first floor and create somewhat of an arcade, or just additional sidewalk space, if you will, like a Bella
What is
Bakery.
Dover Cove?
The excerpts of the report that was added, one
Oh,
of the
right,
last
right,
page
no,
of it
sorry.
has a rendering of it, and it has that, and we contemplated the Bella
I don't-
Bakery building. The only thing, I mean, certainly, the only limitation, I'm happy to include that, absolutely. The only limitation is recognizing that Bella Bakery building was a nice wide property. It wasn't necessarily that deep, but it was nice and wide, so you're able to get a nice long facade. That's not the case necessarily here. It's the case for a couple of the properties. Others that you have much more narrow. So if someone were to demo that building, for example, or demo the building next to Apple Dental and fall under that and have that recessed, just know that Apple Dental isn't going to have that recessed. So it might take some time, and in the meantime, you're going to have a bit of a sawtooth pattern where this one might be recessed, this one might not be. But at the end of the day, the end result should be net increase in that pedestrian space, even for some buildings, if you get it. So
What's your recommendation on that recess? I mean, Bella Bakery's looks about 10 feet?
I don't think
10,
it's that
12,
much.
probably.
You're-
I don't even think it's that
That
much.
much.
I don't, maybe not even that, but it's deceptive because if it's only 6 feet, you still have the sidewalk, the city's sidewalk in front.
Chris, would you say that?
So-
I mean, the whole building doesn't actually stick. I mean, I go to Bella Bakery all the time, but where the tables are, that part's recessed, and then the building space right next to it where they have the music, that's right up to what would be the property line. Right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But
Right.
It looks,
Yeah,
But-
well, that's good.
But without not allowing for the music, and I don't want to talk in specifics, but
okay.
we're talking about that building as an example, is that it should be across the way. Our goal should be down. If we're going to do this, then our goal should be to create a truly connective, inviting community for our businesses, for our visitors, for our residents. So what I like is Burritoville is a good example. Burritoville has the ability to, it has some,
they have space.
well, and they
inside.
have some,
But that's within the property.
yes, but they also have some of their, tables out by the curb and out. So I'm just giving that as an example that if that, I can envision this whole area.
Well-
If we could make it into a pedestrian walkway where you feel very comfortable just strolling, I think it would really help our businesses.
Okay.
It would encourage us to be outdoors.
The only thing, your point's well taken, but the only thing about that area, the sidewalk, the city sidewalk is wider there than it is at Bella Bakery. So it's deceptive to say the way the sidewalk is. We need a little specifics, but I don't know how much. It's at least 15-foot sidewalk there to the front of the property line of the building. It's 12 feet or so.
It is larger than the standard sidewalk in the central business district. Yeah.
So, in other words, what I'm thinking is what you're saying. We got to put a number on what you want the recess to be.
And
you
perhaps you
gotta
can work on that
calculate
and
the-
come back with
Yeah.
us with
Maybe
suggestions.
it'll be sort of like in the same way that Central Business District currently has a percentage rear setback. Maybe it's percentage front
Recess.
first floor.
Recess.
Right, recess. So effectively, your first floor might start up 5 feet from your property line, but your second floor could start right at it.
Right.
Additionally, just another thing to add to your sentiment is that we added something in the architectural design that said, to the extent possible, projects shall install awnings or eyebrows for portions of the project that abut city sidewalks. So the idea is, not only are you activating the
It'll be
sidewalk, but now
covered.
you're protected from the elements as you walk from place to place. Instead of just sort of jumping in or not wanting to walk at all. So okay, we can work on that.
Okay. Another thing I'd like to mention, the art in public places has me, even though it sounds great, has me a little concerned. Because, for instance, in the county, there's a whole division that, of administrators that oversee the art in public places for county buildings, and they're actually expert art collectors. They're very knowledgeable in it, and they make decisions based on the buildings. I'm worried about what we consider art now is allowed and later it's not. So that has me a little giving points for that. And making sure I don't know, I don't understand how we're going to decide what's acceptable art in public places.
I mean, currently, so for city buildings, we fall under Miami-Dade County Code, and when we've done the community center, for example, there was a long, drawn-out process with community participation and people that got selected. That wouldn't be the case here. The case would be on these kind of projects that would go through planning and zoning for review. If in addition to this, we wanted to have some design guidelines or art guidelines as to what that entails, we can also do that as a way to limit it. Some places, you know, have really extensive design guidelines, and then not only say, when you say art in public places, people immediately think of you're putting a statue somewhere, but that can be anything from a piece of artwork that stands by itself to something that is incorporated into the building, into imprints on a sidewalk, mosaic on a building, some kind of feature like that. So if you want, we can drill down on that.
And that tends to be generally where most art in public places has gone now, is to designs on the buildings themselves, because in reality, when you do, in the past when we've had art in public places, not within Miami Springs, but in other areas throughout the county, we have very expensive pieces of art that may have been purchased by the building owners when they were doing the development, but the maintenance of them, when those buildings change hands, you can't just go and repaint that. That's a piece of art, and it really belongs to the artist, and the artist is the only one who has the ability to do any work on it. So it becomes a really big maintenance issue, and having the maintenance to do something when it's been damaged by a hurricane, or it's been vandalized or something. So I'd like us to kind of rethink that and have the ability to be very selective.
Okay.
I think did we not go through that with the community center and the pool as well?
Well, you're forgetting that the center was public money. This is private money doing this.
Yeah.
True.
This is their
that's right.
prerogative.
That's
We're setting the parameters
right.
for what they could put there, but it's their prerogative for
right. Yeah, that's true.
what we just have to set what kind of art we want there, as same as what kind of fountains we want. We don't want too many. Well, I'm not going to say it, but we want to make sure that I frankly don't even care to have fountains myself, but I'll go with whatever the council says. But I don't know if we need to have fountains throughout the front storefront. The art satisfies me, and the recess satisfies me more than having fountains.
All of those things are really the same. They're all art. If you have like water running down a wall on the storefront, or you have, if they did those three, they got the 0.7. It's too much for the. If you could even combine those, it would make more sense.
Okay.
And also, one other thing, Mayor, could you give me like 2 examples of how we've used this creative excellence elements in projects on 36th Street?
Sure.
36th Street.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
You said that we've used that's something that's happened with the projects on 36th Street.
Chris, can you opine on that? How it's been implemented?
Well, the one project I can think of is the hotel that's under construction.
The
The Wyndham?
Wyndham Garden, thank you, where they got bonus points for having the porte cochere. They have a very wide, large setback. First of all, they widened the sidewalks. In addition to the city sidewalks, they gave another 10 foot of their property to make that a really wide sidewalk. And then beyond that, they have a whole plaza for outdoor sitting and dining. So there were a lot of elements there. They also did alley improvements on the alley to the west of the property. So there were a number of elements there that they picked and chose from to get some of their bonus. And they did not take the full bonus either. They got to where they thought they wanted to be. We got the amenities that we felt that we wanted, and then both parties were happy.
Chris, and is it you that makes and I'm just curious, that makes when they say, okay, we're applying for these points based on these things, who makes the decision that it's acceptable or not?
Basically in my hands, which of course then must need to be affirmed by either Planning and Zoning Board or Board of Adjustment, and of course the City Council ultimately. So you all get to take a look at what you think.
The site plan.
If my decision making is sound, and hopefully you'll think that it is. The other thing I'd like to say is, the way that I interpret this, when you see like the .25, and some of those I think are high, I agree with you, Councilwoman. But for me, it's not a 0 or a .25, it's up to .25 that we'll get to decide. Well, you've sort of gone halfway in that. We'll give you 10 points for that, but this is not 25 or.
Right, not
that's-
an automatic.
That's a pretty weak attempt. We'll give you 5 on that one, that kind of thing. And we negotiate that out. And again, I try to get a package of amenities that I think is reasonable for the city for what we're giving, and that they feel comfortable to what they're giving to us. And
Okay.
we've never failed to come to an agreement on that. But my expectations on those projects are pretty high.
Good, good.
Anybody else?
I have a question. So the reason that we're taking the parking case by case is because if we increase the FAR, some of these businesses are not going to meet the parking requirements. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think the primary reason is that if you look at the map, the properties are all very different. It's not a just an ocean of shopping strips, malls that you've got that, or office buildings. You get a bit of a hodgepodge, and then you also have amenities in the area, like, you know, when the city decided to put on-street parking effectively from Hook Square all the way down to the end of that Canal Street before the bend. That's a lot of parking that is underutilized a lot of the time. There's the parking lot between Canal Street, Nakota, and Nueva Poinciana that is underutilized, and I know that the city just put up signage for it, but it's underutilized, and you've got other issues there. So the idea is, you've got the increase in trolleys, bike sharing. The idea is that now, and the increase in golf carts, the idea is that essentially trying to look at parking from just simply being one-dimensional, what can you provide on site, to how can we bear all these resources, because they are resources. How can you make them assist a person that's trying to put a second story on their building? That person's trying to bring something to the community. Are you gonna hit them over the head with trying to provide 6 new parking spaces that they cannot provide because the first floor is already built out? So it wouldn't be necessarily assigning parking spaces, like you get 6 of these Canal Street. It's sort of like there's a pool from which everybody gets to take advantage of as the uses come into the area.
Now, the other question or suggestion I have is, I think I read somewhere that you guys are looking into it, but I'm not sure how you're looking into it. But my suggestion is on these businesses over here, all right, perhaps whatever's in front of you on the canal side is yours, meaning that you're gonna have to do something on that side, like widening it, putting a wider sidewalk. When you
On the Canal Bank side?
On the Canal Bank, yeah. Now, when you go to South Beach, when you go to South Beach on the back of it, on the what do they call that? Back of the hotels. All the hotels are responsible for that area. That's why when you walk on some of them, you have the wooden platforms, and then on some of them you don't. You have concrete. It's because they require them to take care of that, the back spot. Now, I'm thinking maybe we could do that. If you own the businesses, your perimeters from here to here, you also own or not own it, but you're required to do something on the bank side. Maybe making a wider sidewalk. Maybe if you don't have the room in front of your business, maybe you can do it on the other side. You can have tables. If you open up an ice cream shop, you can have the tables on the other side, or you have to do
To activate the Canal Bank.
Exactly.
Okay.
Put a nice big wide sidewalk or a wooden bank.
We'll take a look at that. I mean, I know that that area there is also a bit of a hodgepodge, because you have private property owners own the property, then we own part of the road, the school board owns another part of the road, the Canal Bank is South Florida Water Management District on one side.
The school board owns?
Believe it or not, the school board owns the right of way, which the roads from about Esplanade, Royal Poinciana, Market Street, and a piece of Nakota and a piece of Canal Street.
Yep.
That for some reason was never dedicated to the city. It's actually one of our to-do projects.
It's actually most of Canal Street.
Most of Canal Street, right?
Board of Education, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just, I mean, it was news to me when we found out while we're doing this exercise. So I'm sure they're going to be happy to give it back to us, because I don't think they want to maintain our roads. But
They
but
don't anyway.
So we can certainly look at that. I do know that the city once upon a time looked at doing improvements in that area, and the high cost. It was a high cost because you needed some canal bank stabilization work. Effectively, you needed a seawall, and so it'd be interesting to see how much functional space you can get out of it before it gets into a danger zone.
Well,
We
maybe
can
that
look at it.
maybe that's something that could be as amended if the ordinance goes by. That's something that could be a paragraph stating
As permitted.
or as information comes forward of what you can and can't do there. But
Understood.
it could be in there.
Okay,
Could be in
absolutely.
So what exactly do you need from us then?
Well, wait,
So-
wait. Are any more questions? Okay, I want to now I want a little synopsis of the difference of what we're doing now with the 1.7, and make sure it's clear so people understand of what you're in reality. The only thing, what you're doing different from what it was before.
Okay,
All
sure.
right, a good synopsis, and you have the written down what is brought up from council, the changes to come for first reading.
I do have that.
Okay, and then when you're done, we'll let anybody who wishes to speak on this could come up and speak. I'm going to ask you kindly that if I ask you to stop, if you made your point, I won't stop you unless it's necessary, but we'll try to keep it short and sweet. Go ahead.
So, Mayor, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, I'd like to just go over the council comments real quick.
Right.
And then go back and just sort of summarize everything.
Go ahead.
So, what I'm hearing loud and clear is certainly review the values associated with each of the elements, which now that we know that there's an interest in doing this, we'll definitely do. Tighten up some of the pedestrian amenity, make them requirements for retail and pedestrian activation on the first floor. Activate with storefront glass. Also, the recessed first floor for additional sidewalk space. Eliminate the hotel incentives. I have here tighten up the water and art in public places features, and for the art in public places features specifically, provide design guidelines and maintenance guidelines. We also have canal bank improvements as permitted.
Yes. Everybody agree with that?
It's fine.
Huh?
Okay.
Say yes. Everybody
Yes.
say
Yes.
yes. I want
Yes.
yes.
So
Okay.
we'll make those changes
We're
for.
not gonna nod it. We're gonna say so. We're all for one for all. Okay. So that's that.
The then, insofar as a synopsis for what this ultimately does, again, this creates a very narrow area within the central business district, within which we are effectively increasing the design standards, tying it to elements of Pueblo or Mission Revival, as well as some of the other requirements that were discussed today. We are providing some flexibility in the parking calculations to allow buildings to expand or new buildings to be created, say in one of the ones got demoed like the theater, by counting a combination of on-site parking as well as off-site, which it could be on-street or it could be public parking or other trolley stops or things like that. Similar to Northwest 36th Street, what this is also doing is creating an FAR incentive program where at the option of the property owner, by providing the city with certain what we're calling creative excellence elements, you have the ability to increase your base floor area ratio from a 1.0 to up to and not to exceed a 1.7, which does not exceed the current the current buildings in the central business district as a whole. So effectively, what we're talking about is all of these things in an FAR range of 0.7 for just the area identified as the gateway.
And state specifically height falls under the standard of the central business area right now.
Well, first and foremost, by charter, anything that contains more than 2 residential dwelling units shall not exceed 3 stories or 40 feet.
Right.
Regardless of
But
where it is in the
where
city.
Okay.
In the central business district, you do have a high limitation of 3 stories or 40 feet. You could potentially get a variance to, if you have a parrot pit feature or something to that extent. Believe it or not, the FAR and the parking requirements are such a limiting factor that you could not get a 4, a 5, a 6-story building.
Understand.
Right.
I want it out there clear.
No, I understand.
I want it clear. That's it?
That's all we got.
Anybody?
So, the only thing, well, I guess just to answer Councilman Petrolanda's question, what we would want at the outcome of this meeting, which we've gotten it, It's certainly direction on, first and foremost, do we move forward with it? And secondly, the feedback that we've gotten.
Okay.
All right,
Let's.
that's
Anybody want to speak?
My name is Eric Elzen. I live at 98 Canal Street. I just want to offer to you parking. You know, the downtown, the people don't have to provide any parking space because they're granted a variance. If you're going to bring all this square footage into the downtown, you're going to have to build a parking garage. Where are the people going to park? You think you want to get Starbucks and you want to get another nice restaurant in here? You've got to provide them with the parking. They're not going to build a restaurant and then expect the parking. And I just think you're addressing this maybe a little too fast and a little too forward. First, you've got to decide how much parking you can provide, and then you've got to design this gateway around the parking. That's all. It's the only thing I want to offer. I think it's a great idea. I think all of you should get the Dover Coal Report and read it because there's a lot of good things in there. I was here when we had it, so, but it deals with the downtown, and there's some renderings that they have. I guess you still have them. I don't know, but you should look at those maybe and get some more ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi there, Rogelio Madan, 224 Lenape Drive. I'm a city planner, so I've reviewed the ordinance that was put online, and generally the .9 FAR, I don't see a major...
0.7.
Sorry, 0.7.
Don't start already.
0.7. You know, I looked at the
And you're a
theater.
planner, huh?
I'm a planner.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. So I looked at the theater, and the increase would only result in an increase of 23,000 square feet. That's not going to do a whole lot at the end of the day. Hialeah, on the other hand, I looked at their comp plan, and they allow 9 FAR. So 1.7 in the big scheme of things is not very large. My concern was echoed by Councilwoman Zapata and Mitchell that the list of items, it has a lot of very good things, but some of these things I think should be required across the board for all of the CBD, especially the site planning and improving pedestrian access and linkages and circulation pattern. That should probably just be a requirement. Recessed first floor, creating expanded sidewalks, as you mentioned, that should be a requirement. That is to me the most important thing in a city, is how people interact with the buildings and the sidewalks. So if that's an issue fitting it in, maybe look at the rear setback, because why is that 30 feet? You know, just another thought. Why is that 30 feet? Move the building back on the site so that you have more room in the front to do things that you need, because who's walking around the back? Maybe you need it for loading or other things, but generally that's probably not necessary. The other thing is landscaping. There's a proposal for you get improvements for landscaping. Some of these should just be requiring street trees 25 feet on center. One of the things I would state is that in order to encourage walking, this allows you to put palm trees. I would say that it should be shade trees only as opposed to palm trees.
Yeah, because they fall.
Because palm trees, the leaves fall, and they don't provide shade, and it's hot, so you want the shade. And the canopy is what makes Miami Springs great, and palm trees are beautiful, but they're not really improving our canopy. So I would say those three things should be mandatory. The other thing on the parking, I think bicycle parking should be mandated. That shouldn't be something that should be negotiated. We see a lot of people biking around the city with the bike share program. People have their own bikes. Trends show that people are driving less and more people are walking. More people are using Uber. We have shuttles. We have all sorts of public transportation options. So bicycle parking is the way to go. And believe it or not, self-driving vehicles will probably be here 10, 15 years, and parking garages will be a completely obsolete use. So just think about that when you're planning for parking. That technology will be here sooner than we think.
That's it?
Sorry?
That's it? One more?
I think that's it. I had another concern: art in public places and community entry features. Can you double dip on that? Can the community entry feature be considered the art in public place thing, and can that be double dipped? So just to ensure that that doesn't happen. And
Combining them.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that was it for my comments.
Thank
but
you.
generally, I'm supportive of the concept there. So.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
You work with Danny Gelba?
Sorry?
You work
Danny
with Danny
Gelba.
Gelba?
Dan
I've
Gelber.
worked with Russell Galbit.
Gelba, the mayor.
Gelber, yes.
Mayor of Miami
yes.
Beach.
I've never heard of him referred to as Danny. Dan Gelber, yes.
He's a friend of mine.
That
That's
threw me
why I
off.
asked you.
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
your shirt. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
sorry. Not to intrude.
Thank you. Say hi to your father for me. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, I think that
Good head start on this.
Yeah, I think we want to go ahead and with the suggestions of the gentleman, and I think that it's up to council if they want to go ahead. We can vote tonight. It's a special meeting. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would like to entertain a motion to move this forward to a first reading of an ordinance for the next council meeting.
I certainly move for that to happen, yes.
I'll second it.
Second, you got a first and second. Call the vote.
Vice Mayor Zapata?
Yes.
Councilman Best?
Aye.
Councilwoman Mitchell?
Yes.
Councilman Petralanda?
Yes.
Mayor Bay?
Yes. Very good. Good evening. Everybody be sweet. Make sure that you get the report and report to the people that you're here representing what was stated up here in the public.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Mayor, hold on. I just want to make sure that we advertise this correctly,
Yeah.
so there's no miscommunications. I already received an email today with a lot of misinformation. And
We got the press here. They'll
Well.
take care of it. Don't worry.
what do you think, Mayor? What do you think?
Gotcha. This meeting's adjourned. Andy, great job. It was very